A preview of the book of Micah, Who is Like Yah, chapter 4. Micah chapter 4 follows a chiastic structure. Jerusalem made great again, international peace enforced, Israel regathered and restored, then, working backwards, Israelites rescued, Israel invaded by Gentiles, and Jerusalem's Lord honored. Now there are several theories about eventual restoration of Israel. One theory says that the promises made by God were conditional and Israel never repented, so have become null and void. Another theory says that promises were fulfilled spiritually by Jesus when he said, for example, "Tear down this temple and I shall rebuild it in 3 days," speaking of his own body. Others say no, it was fulfilled literally by the Roman Catholic Church, which became Israel, God's kingdom on earth. Others say the promises are fulfilled in Christianity, or promises will be fulfilled spiritually when Israel repents. But then finally, others say no, the promises of God will be fulfilled literally, as all such promises were fulfilled literally in the past. So, beginning with the first point, Jerusalem made great again, verse 1, "It shall come to pass in the latter days that the mountain of the house of the Lord shall be established as the highest of the mountains, and it shall be lifted up above the hills, and peoples shall flow to it, and many nations shall come." Reference to the latter days means the end times, the very far future. Mountains here are metaphors for governments, mountains being higher and more important than hills. Now, several mountains are associated with the city of Jerusalem in Scripture and in tradition. Mount Antonia, for example, the Mount of Olives, Mount Ophel, New Zion, Mount Moriah, where Abraham offered up his son Isaac, Mount Scopus, and Mount Zion, where was located the so-called City of David. Now, 3 of these, Antonia, Moriah, and Zion, are claimants to be the original temple site. 4 of these mounts are still important: Mount of Olives, Mount Moriah, Mount Ophel, and Mount Zion. Continuing with verse 2, "Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob, that he may teach us his ways, and that we may walk in his paths. For out of Zion shall go forth the law, and the word of the Lord from Jerusalem." The law here is the Hebrew term Torah, which means instruction in how to live, and word, deber, meaning a message or a revelation. Yes, one day Jerusalem will be the center of world government and religious renewal. Section B, International Peace Enforced. Verse 3 reads, "He shall judge between many peoples, and shall decide disputes for strong nations far away. And they shall beat their swords into plowshares, and their spears into pruning hooks." Because of Hebrew poetic parallelism, the term judge is equivalent to decide disputes, and thus the nations will find peace and prosperity enforced upon them. Now, what are some implications for society from this teaching? First, the Lord honors jurisprudence, justice. There will remain national identities, no new world order. He desires disarmament, including denuclearization. There will remain metallurgy for tool making and the engineering sciences, leading to abundant agriculture, providing for leisure. Leisure leads to reflection, philosophy, research, design. Verses 3 and 4, "Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war any more, but they shall sit every man under his vine and under his fig tree, and no one shall make them afraid." Every man. Currently, the devil tries to kill off young men so that they will not live, labor, or love children. They will be dead. Rather, God's will for the nations is that there be international diplomacy leading to peace, that young men live long, that they love and they labor. God wants every people to enjoy peace and prosperity. There should be individual land ownership and stewardship, each man under his own fig tree or vine, and abundant food, especially fruit and vegetables. There should be domestic tranquility for all. However, currently, these not being available in their lands, millions of men are migrating westwards. Continuing with verse 4 and verse 5, "For the mouth of the Lord of hosts has spoken, for all the peoples walk each in the name of its God, but we will walk in the name of the Lord our God forever and ever." Now, what are some of these divine titles used in chapter 4? Well, primarily the Lord, the name Yahweh, used 10 times, but then mention of the God, the Elohim of Jacob, but the same word Elohim used of pagan deities. Our God Elohim, then, is the one whom we shall worship forever, also called the Lord Adon of the whole earth or land. So, when Micah speaks of the mouth of the Lord, he's referring to himself and other legitimate prophets, for so they are called in Deuteronomy 18 and 2 Chronicles 36. To walk in the name means to take action under authority of or to obey the commands of one's deity. What about national gods? Well, Deuteronomy 32, Psalm 82, and other passages explain this. We shall look at these in a moment. But then, many Israelites thought of Yahweh as their national God, and pagans likewise understood Yahweh to be Israel's national God. However, Yahweh himself insisted that he is God over all the gods. Well, what about national gods? Deuteronomy 32:8 reads, "When the Most High divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the peoples according to the number of the sons of God." So reads the English Standard Version. See note number 2 in the New International Version. Sons of God was a title for those spirit beings who visited human women in Genesis 6 and assembled together to meet with Yahweh in Job chapter 1. Psalm 82 reads, "God has taken his place in the divine council. In the midst of the gods he holds judgment, where he says to them, 'You are gods.'" Following the flood, as humans migrated and became people groups, the Lord assigned a spirit guide over each one of them. Unfortunately, these guides failed in their task, and people began to worship them as gods. Part C, Israel regathered and restored. Verses 6 and 7, "In that day, declares the Lord, I will assemble the lame and gather those who have been driven away, and those whom I have afflicted. And the lame I will make the remnant, and those who were cast off a strong nation, and the Lord will reign over them in Mount Zion from this time forth and forever." In that day, referring back to the latter days in verse 1. Other prophets had said that Israel will always have a remnant, a people who remain even after being exiled. So, here are some things that we learned from history about the fulfillment of chapter 4. First, Judah will go into exile. This happened in 586. Yahweh rescues a remnant, happened in 538. And then we still await when nations will gather and Israel will thresh them. When Yahweh reigns from the Temple Mount, when nations come to learn from Yahweh, when Yahweh judges and instructs nations, and Yahweh enforces peace and prosperity around the globe. Verse 8, "And you, O tower of the flock, hill of the daughter of Zion, to you it shall come, the former dominion shall come, and kingship for the daughter of Jerusalem. Again, because of poetic parallelism, we understand that tower is a metaphor meaning dominion and kingship, or a protective monarchy, called here Daughter Zion, in other words, Jerusalem in the end times. Cities were often called daughter, perhaps because they were lovely, cherished, and protected by their national god. Borrowing language from Micah, Zechariah would say in the next century, "Escape to Zion, you who dwell with the daughter of Babylon." And Jeremiah, "The daughter of Babylon is like a threshing floor," again using Micah's language. Part sub C, Israelites rescued. Verse 9, "Now, why do you cry aloud? Is there no king in you? Has your counselor perished? That pain seized you like a woman in labor? Writhe and groan, O daughter of Zion, like a woman in labor." Well, they had no king, or soon would have no king, when Jehoiakim would be exiled to Babylon in 597 BC. And continuing with verse 10 and the exile to Babylon, "For now you shall go out from the city and dwell in the open country. You shall go to Babylon. There you shall be rescued. There the Lord will redeem you from the land of your enemies." Micah was very explicit. There would be an exile to Babylon, which would happen in the next century. First, elite families were exiled in 597 BC, and commoners by their thousands in 586 BC and afterwards, leading to a 70-year Babylonian captivity, though not exile. The 70 years had been foretold by Jeremiah, chapter 25, when he said that the people would serve the king of Babylon. Thus, in 607, Nebuchadnezzar II exiled the royal families, including Daniel. In 597, King Jehoiakim was deposed and exiled. In 586, the Babylonians destroyed Jerusalem and its temple, leading to a second major exile, and in 581 a third major exile. But then in 538, under the Persian king Cyrus, many captive peoples were permitted to return to their homelands and ordered to build temples to their own gods and to pray for the new king of Babylon. So let's do the maths. The year 607, the beginning of the 70 years, minus 538 equals exactly the 70 years of captivity or submission to the king of Babylon. Point B prime, Israel invaded by Gentiles. Verse 11, "Now many nations are assembled against you, saying, Let her be defiled, and let our eyes gaze upon Zion. But they do not know the thoughts of the Lord. They do not understand his plan, that he has gathered them as sheaves to the threshing floor." Defiled is the image of a public rape. What many nations is he talking about? Well, first, the Babylonian army consisted of many nationalities. However, that did not lead to a threshing. The context, rather, is one of impending judgment likely to happen in the end times. Thus, the climax of history will occur in Jerusalem, not in New York City, nor in Washington, D.C., not even in Beijing or Rome. Rather, there will be an end-time coalition of nations who are listed in Psalm 83. These include Edom, Ishmaelites, Moab, Hagrites, Gebal, Ammon, Amalek, Philistia, Tyre, and Ashur. However, these ancient peoples, for the most part, are no longer called by those names. However, their geographical territories today are included within the countries of Arabia, Egypt, Iraq, Jordan, Lebanon, Libya, Palestine, Syria, and Turkey. Iran is not included. Thus, folks, things could soon prove apocalyptic. Lastly, point A prime, Jerusalem's Lord honored. Verse 13 reads, Arise and thresh, O daughter of Zion, for I will make your horn iron, I will make your hoofs bronze. You shall beat in pieces many peoples, and shall devote their gain to the Lord, their wealth to the Lord of the whole world. Peoples, mean groups whose members are related by kinship or by religion. By way of summary, the divine actions described in Micah chapter 4 include Yahweh, who teaches his ways, law, and word, who judges between nations, who assembles the afflicted, who reigns from Jerusalem, who rescues, that is, redeems captives, who thinks and plans, and gathers peoples for threshing. And Judah's actions can be summarized as follows. They walk in Yahweh's name forever. They become a remnant, that is, a renewed nation. They cry, writhe, and groan, but go out and dwell in the open on their way to Babylon, later to thresh and beat many peoples.